Shadows in the sky, footsteps in the night behind me.
The CIA as an integral part of a parallel shadow government beside the elected government of the United States. The United States is not the only country in the world with a deep state. This can actually be observed everywhere. The theory of deep states and deep politics was developed by a man named Peter Dale Scott. And essentially, his theory goes that the United States has obviously an elected government, that being the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the presidency. Although behind this overt government stands a largely unelected, unaccountable, and often reactionary wing of the government that acts as a guardian of elite interests and corporate profits. This is often termed the deep state. Deep state to mean any unelected officials that work to undermine the democratic will of the people of the country.
In this exciting episode of the Eclectic Compass, I'm going to be telling you wonderful people about Heinrich Himmler's Fourth Reich and the inceptus of the C.I.A. But to do that, you got to take a look at the events leading up to it, because without that, you can't understand the whole thing. Ultimately, you got to take a look at Heinrich Himmler and what he planned to do after Germany had lost the war.
There is one document that appears to indicate where Odessa came into existence. It's called the Maison Rouge Report. Declassified in 2000, it details a secret meeting that took place on the 10th of August 1944. The document tells of a conference between Germany's top industrialists and SS leaders in Strasbourg in France, at a hotel called Maison Rouge.
The Maison Rouge meeting was attended by representatives of the key German industries, and it was presided over by a high-ranking officer from the SS, and talked about what would happen in the future now that Germany was certain to lose the war.
The plan was for the Nazis to regroup and rise again.
The whole emphasis was on economics. Banking and economics, to make the actual bankers and industrialists set up an organization abroad and transfer their funds abroad.
I've mentioned this in a few other videos, but I'm going to mention it again because it's important and people need to know about it. The Red House Report. It came out, there was a meeting at the Maison Rouge Hotel in Strasbourg on August 10th, 1944. And the existence of this report and the contents therein only became declassified in 1996 via a FOIA request. Otherwise, nobody would know a thing about it. The Red House report involved the relocation of Nazi officials, scientists, and resources to various locations around the world, particularly South America, to continue their work and influence. The goal was to ensure the survival of the Nazi ideology and to establish a Fourth Reich, but not just in Germany. The document was declassified in 1996 after a FOIA request, as I've previously stated. See, you got to understand, Nazism was bigger than Hitler. Had Hitler never lived, there'd still be Nazis. Nazism was a cult. It's a quasi-religion. And I think, excuse my dog, I think I may even do a video about that, the religious beliefs of the Nazis, because they really did have some, and they weren't Christian. Some key components of the plan included financial control. The Nazis aimed to maintain control over the global financial system through various means, such as the establishment of shell companies and the use of stolen assets. Scientific advancements. The plan sought to preserve and advance Nazi research in fields like physics, aerospace, and medicine. This was achieved through the relocation of scientists and the establishment of research facilities in other countries. And political influence. The Nazis sought to infiltrate and influence various governments and organizations to further their goals. This was accomplished through the establishment of networks and the use of propaganda. Weltanschauungskrieg means worldview war. In other words, propaganda, trying to influence people's minds and change their attitudes about shit. And, well, essentially, they're seeking to set up a Fourth Reich incrementally through economic and social means. And the people who are going to get seduced by the whole thing, they don't necessarily even have to know it's the Nazis. They don't even have to know. Most people don't even know what Nazism is or fascism is. They don't know. So, they can be sucked into fascism and Nazism while all the time saying that they hate Nazis and fascists. But at any rate, let's move on.
Who maintained that the power behind Odessa was Hitler's executive staff. Martin Bormann was the Führer's right-hand man.
Martin Bormann was the head of Hitler's chancellery, and therefore he was in charge of the party. It is often said that Bormann actually corrupted Hitler in some way, that his policies became Hitler's policies, though that may be a little far-fetched. He was certainly a very Machiavellian, a very cunning character, and what he wanted, he generally
Now, keep in mind, this was all quite treasonous on the part of these sons of bitches. Himmler was not actually there at the meeting. He did it through an intermediary. But basically, he was the one who was going to run the whole thing and escape offshore. But the English got him. They caught him by accident, really. And, they said he killed himself, but, well... And probably they did it to keep him from spilling the beans, because he was making a lot of back-channel negotiations and deals with the British and other Allied powers. So essentially, they're going to take all these billions and zillions of dollars that they've looted from all over Europe, and they're going to take them down to South America. And the guy who's running the whole thing is going to be Martin Bormann. I heard a man say that he's like Dick Cheney without the warmth and charm. He was a steely-eyed Nazi son of a bitch. And let's read about this, because supposedly he died. Let's just read about this. Nazi war criminal Martin Bormann died in Paraguay in 1959, according to files of the Paraguayan police that were recently discovered and made public. A report in the police file said Bormann succumbed to stomach cancer in Hauenau, an insular German-speaking colony 220 miles south of Asunción, the Paraguayan capital. The report, dated August 24, 1961, was prepared by security personnel from what was then the dreaded Division of Technical Affairs, the Paraguayan Interior Ministry, during the dictatorship of Alfredo Stroessner. And in Asunción, Judge Luis Benitez Riera verified the document's authenticity and reminded journalists that those files are now open to the public. So there you have it. The police did a report on his death, and a judge certified that the report was legit. And then let's continue. The author Milton Schulman, a wartime member of Canadian intelligence, said that an earlier dental examination suggested the skull had 8 fillings added after 1945. Despite being found in the yellow sandy soil typical of Berlin, the skull was covered with thick red clay comparable to that of the Ita region of Paraguay, where he is rumored to have died in 1959. Unconnected witnesses also tell precisely the same story. So, we've got this guy, probably the West German government or our government. The Western governments brought his bones back and salted them to keep anybody from knowing that he'd managed to get away. And as you will see, it was done with our help, which dovetails into the inceptus of the CIA. But anyway, there's Bormann there. He was actually a lot uglier than that. He was, man.
So both Alan Dulles, the OSS agent, and John Foster Dulles, the Sullivan and Cromwell law partner, actually had personal ties with the Nazis. Alan Dulles met with Hitler in 1933 while on a diplomatic mission with the State Department. So Dulles, was writing letters back, correspondences back to his State Department colleagues, and he displayed curiosity and interest in the rising fascist party. He saw potential business deals with Nazi Germany and was particularly enamored by the Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels, who led the cruel anti-Semitic media empire in the Reich. Despite all his horrible features, Alan Dulles remarked that he admired Goebbels' quote, frankness and sincerity. Lovely to hear. John Foster Dulles, the elder brother, he arguably admired Nazis openly, and he was even more of a Nazi sympathizer than his brother. He insisted that all correspondences from Sullivan and Cromwell to their German clients were signed off as Hail Hitler, and until his death in the mid-60s, John Foster Dulles publicly displayed his admiration of Nazis.
So now they have their plan hatched, but, they need to implement it. They need somebody to help them get all that loot out of the good old fatherland and down to South America. So, enter stage right, Alan Dulles appears right on cue with his brother John Foster. See, you got to understand, American big business had been helping the Nazis all along. And let me just read here. John Foster Dulles, Alan Dulles, Prescott Bush, and Averell Harriman were the most flagrant in providing aid for the Nazis. Not only did they help Hitler seize power, but their actions also facilitated other American aid to the Nazis. Bush and Harriman acted as Hitler's American banker, operating a company, Brown Brothers Harriman, and the Union Banking Company that was at the center of the Nazis' espionage ring in the United States. Okay, Prescott Bush was Daddy Bush's daddy, and second baby Bush's granddaddy. So he's the progenitor of two American presidents, and he's a spy for the fucking Nazis. He had a company called the Union Bank, which was laundering money for the Nazis, doing precisely the kind of shit that we're discussing now. The FBI stepped in and actually closed the bank down under the Trading with the Enemies Act. It's not a conspiracy theory. They did that. And there's just a host of others, not just these guys, but these are the main guys. Once it was clear that war was imminent, the Dulles brothers attempted to cloak the Nazi investments of their clients. So from the very beginning, Dulles was working at hiding assets of the Nazis around the world using the banking system. And he was doing it from the very beginning of the war. Now, Kurt Schroeder, he's a Nazi. There he is with that scar on his face. It's interesting. They had a little sport back then where they would plinky-tink at each other with these sharp swords, trying to cut each other in the face. And, guys actually wanted to get the scars because they thought it made him look all rugged and handsome. And anyway, there he is. He got the scar on his left cheek. Kurt Schroeder's financial house, with offices in Europe and New York, worked under Himmler. Alan Dulles was on his board. Dulles helped to create a network of shell companies to conceal Nazi money through Sullivan and Cromwell. Sullivan and Cromwell is the law firm in which his brother John Foster was employed. And this is an established fact. Dulles was on his board. The FBI discovered this, but wasn't able to do anything since Dulles ran American intelligence in Europe, and Truman was heavily influenced by big American corporations such as ITT, Gillette, Ford, and Kodak, which were involved. So here's Dulles, who's running the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. Oh yeah, I bet he's really going to help. And then, of course, you have Gillette, Ford. Adolf Hitler had a big portrait of Henry Ford in his office. He just thought Henry Ford was the bee's knees. J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, demanded an investigation, but John Foster Dulles quashed it along with King George VI, who had influence with the Bank of International Settlements, which was aiding in the transfer of funds. So the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland, it's all real cagey, and they don't let anybody see the records in Swiss banks, and so, they just use that bank to move everything. And, the British royal family were Nazis. They were very pro-Nazi. I've seen, old videos of the Nazis or the royal family doing the Heil Hitler salute, and Queen Elizabeth, who just recently died, and I saw a video of her as a child doing the Hitler salute. These guys were some Nazis. And then, of course, Dulles was an ardent pro-Nazi sympathizer, along with his brother. His brother, John Foster, down here, was an even more rabid Nazi. So let's continue.
OSS was not created as a usual military establishment. Much like the future CIA, its offshoot, the OSS was quickly filled with members of the elite ruling class. This series, not only in the CIA, but across this entire deep state network, is that most of the people involved are not average folks like you and I. These are people that come from, Wall Street. These can be bankers, lawyers, business executives, former generals. These are the types of people that filled the ranks of the early CIA and the OSS. So it's important to note that these are not average U.S. soldiers. These are people that come from the American.
So now we have the Dulles brothers and a number of other sons of bitches working to launder Nazi money, probably with Martin Bormann. And even though the FBI wanted to put an end to it, President Truman wouldn't allow him because he was probably compromised, if not actually in on it. And so the whole thing went ahead as planned. Anyway, Truman created the CIA at the behest of Dulles. And of course, Dulles was right in the thick of it. He basically founded the CIA. Allen Dulles did. There's a big airport named after the son of a bitch in Washington, Dulles Airport. Now, let's look at Reinhard Gehlen. Reinhard Gehlen was the head of the Nazi counterpart to the CIA, the German Secret Service, German intelligence. He was a Nazi SS general. There's his picture as an old man. There's his picture as a young man. There he is, all Nazi-ish looking, Gehlen-y looking. He was the head of the Foreign Army's East section of the Abwehr, the intelligence service of the German General Staff. He was responsible for gathering and analyzing intelligence on the Soviet Union. Gehlen surrendered to the Allies at the end of the war and later used his knowledge and expertise to establish a new intelligence organization, the Gehlen Organization, at the behest of Allen and John Foster Dulles. Okay, so here we have the head of the Nazi Secret Service. And, he's already got a network of spies built up in the Soviet Union. And since, war looked like it might be on the horizon with the Soviet Union, we just thought that we'd just bring him in. So that's what Dulles did. Dulles didn't have any compunction about that. He was a goddamn Nazi himself anyway. So Gehlen was brought in to the CIA. So you have Dulles starting the CIA, you have the head of the Nazi intelligence being brought into it. Folks, the CIA was started literally by Nazis. Truman wouldn't stop it. He knew about it. He had to know about it. Gehlen would do reports. The story I've heard, Gehlen would make reports about what was going on in Europe and in Russia. And he would send the reports off to Washington. And in Washington, they would just take the letterhead off the reports and just hand it straight to the president, unedited. And then let's not forget Dulles' involvement with the JFK assassination. He was the head of the CIA, and Kennedy fired him, and then he managed to sleaze his way onto the Warren Commission. And if you read a little bit about the Warren Commission, you'll see that he was hip deep in the cover-up. He was. So, this all happened. It's not disputed. What happened to all that money? What happened to their organization? It wasn't confiscated. It wasn't stopped. Apparently, they did it and are still doing it. Why wouldn't they be? Nazis, guys, people like the Nazis don't just give up. You know, cultists and fanatics don't just give up. And apparently the CIA is an institution which acts independently of the civilian government. And I'll give you an example. Tucker Carlson was interviewing Vladimir Putin, and Putin mentioned a program that was going on, and he mentioned that the president told the CIA to stop doing something in another country, and he said that the CIA told him they weren't going to do it. That was overlooked in that interview. Putin actually said that the CIA was working independently of the president. And then let's not forget Chuck Schumer saying that if you mess with the intelligence community, they've got 6 ways to Sunday to mess you up. Isn't that a de facto admission that the intelligence community doesn't work for the civilian government? That they would actually try to torpedo the commander-in-chief's policies and orders? The more I delve into this stuff, the more depressed I become, because it all seems like such a monolith that just can't be. It just doesn't seem like it's worth opposing. Seems like a lost cause. Of course, that doesn't mean you don't. I'm doing my part with these videos. Not many people watch them, but some people do. Heaven help us.
But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
Let me tell you, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
Targets in their sight, running out of light to save me.